Hey everybody, welcome back to Dorm Squad Sports, college sports podcast focused on Alabama athletics. I'm Dakota. We're currently on spring break, so Oakley and Bryant are obviously back home. But so much Alabama news in the NFL has been going on recently with free agency and the NFL Combine, so we had to put something out. So we're going to get to both of those things in this episode. But before we get to any of that, we have some huge news for the podcast. We are now officially a Spotify podcast. So if you are listening to this on Spotify, thank you. Please follow us to make sure you get every new episode that comes out. And if you're still listening on Apple Podcasts and you would like to listen on Spotify, you can give us a follow there. Either way, make sure you're following there, subscribing, 5-star reviews, the whole 9 yards, whatever you do, it'd be greatly appreciated. So now we got that out of the way. Let's start with the NFL Combine, because honestly, it was a lot of expectations, and there was a little bit of bad news coming out because a lot of Alabama players got injured. So we're going to get into some of the injuries and then some of the results and how some people helped to hurt their draft stock, because there were a bunch of people who did a lot of things very well. There are also some people that probably hurt their stock a little bit. So we're gonna hit both of those things. Let's just start with Josh Jacobs, probably one of the biggest names to come out from this class. Definitely RB1. He's currently injured, so it knocked him out of most of the drills. And the thing is, like, we haven't heard anything from him. So it's a little bit scary. We don't know how much he's going to compete at the pro day, if he can do anything at the pro day. And this is just a weird time to have an injury and then not really disclose anything about it. So I still think he'll be the best running back from this class. I still think he's going to go relatively high. But the fact that Jacobs doesn't really have the film from a big sample size, that can be a good thing, because that means he hasn't really played that much, so he can't get injured as often. But if he's having injuries and he doesn't have, 3 years of complete tape to show everything he's worth, you're kind of afraid it'd be a flash in the pan. I don't think it is. I think when you watch the film from this year, there's no way you can do things like what he's done and not be able to do, good things consistently. But when you're asking to put a first round, pick up for a guy, especially a running back, where you can get good running backs pretty much anywhere on the board, it's going to be a little bit scary, especially when you have these injury concerns. So I think he's going to end up being okay, but the fact that he doesn't have as much film as other players in the class, it might work against him. And honestly, he can avoid all these issues if he just goes and has a good pro day. If he can prove that he's healthy at the pro day, measure there, do the 40, do the drills, whatever they want him to do. If he's good at the pro day, then you can completely forget about everything we've said so far, because it won't matter. But we're just not sure yet, so we have to, just wait and see how it goes. All right, let's see. Quentin Williams up next. So he actually had an injury. I want to say it was his finger or something weird that kept him out of drills, but he still ran a 4.8340, which is, I'm thinking it's like top 5 historically for people over 300 pounds. Just a great number for him. Also, 30-inch vertical and 112-inch broad jump, which are just, insane numbers for somebody that size. And a big thing for Quentin Williams is the fact that he is an interview guy. He's a guy where if you talk to him, you're going to want him in your locker room, plain and simple. And he, from everything that the NFL scouts and the people coming out of the meetings was saying, is out of like the top 5 interviews, he was in everybody's top 5. There were a few names that came out that every person wanted. Devin White was one of them, but Quentin Williams was at the top of pretty much everybody's list. If you have a conversation with this guy, you can't help but want to draft him. So I think he really has a good chance. He'll definitely go top 5, no matter how the quarterbacks fall. Honestly, I don't see him falling past 5, but I could also see him not falling past 3 if the Jets keep that pick. I think he'd do a lot in New York's defense with CJ Mosley at linebacker, and we're going to get to that in a second. Okay, so up next is Deontay Thompson. He has the broken wrist, so we knew he wasn't going to do a whole lot, but he did measure. And his size came in a little bit. He's a tad bit taller than A. Jackson and a few pounds thinner than A. Jackson, and people thought Eddie Jackson was a bit undersized. And what scares me is the fact that this whole time he's known that he needs to get his weight up. And I'm pretty sure he was still under 200 pounds for a safety. If I remember right, he weighs less than Kyler Murray, if that shows you anything, with Deontay Thompson. So Bryant and I have had this discussion a lot, and he believes it's not that big of a deal. And I mean, it only takes one team to not be scared of it. But when there's other safeties in this class who are moving up on the stock, or like their draft stock is increasing every week, things like this are going to hurt Deontay Thompson, especially when you pair it with the fact that his film in the last few games of the season, it left a little to be desired. So I think this is really going to knock Deontay Thompson out of first round conversation. He's probably going to go somewhere in day 2. I'd be shocked if he fell all the way to day 3, but somewhere in that, anywhere from early second to even early third round, I think that's where he's going to go. And, with a wrist injury, I doubt he's going to be able to do anything at Pro Day. He might run or something, but he's not going to be able to do much at all. But if he's able to, heal it by the time to do like interviews or, like personal workouts with some of these teams, then he might be able to, get his stock back. But when you're not able to show your athletic ability while everyone else is and they're all doing well, I mean, there's just not much you can do. So he's just having to, be there and just hope something good happens. And once he's healthy, I think he's going to have a strong NFL career. It's going to be tough for him. Honestly, he's one of those players that was right there on the fringe of, should I, declare for the NFL draft or should I come back one more season? And, he's been as high as like top 5 on some people's big boards earlier in the season. So, well, I mean, we're rooting for him, obviously. We're rooting for every Alabama player. But it's going to be a tough situation for him, especially the fact that he can't, like I said, show his athletic ability. So up next, this was one of the worst days, and I'm not trying to like insult anybody, but Isaiah Buggs, I mean, if you ask him, he'll say he had a tough day. He had a 5.1540, which, for big guys, that's not really a number that they care about too much because you're not really running 40 yards down the field that often. But even then, that's still a little bit slow. He had 20 bench reps, which is, kind of low for someone his size. And the really thing that hurt him is that 24-inch vertical. And I know you're thinking, oh, like when do D linemen have to jump up in the air? And it's not something that might translate, perfectly to the NFL, but you need to know what type of athlete these guys are. And the way that they do it is they put the bar literally at 24 inches, so like at 2 feet. I might have said 24 feet earlier, I don't remember, but I meant to say 24 inches. So you have the bar literally at 2 feet, and that's what they assume every person will get. So, they might get up to, 45-inch or 50-inch vertical. You never know. But they put like the lowest that they expect every person to meet is 24 inches, and that's exactly what he got. So they didn't have to move the bar any, and he wasn't getting anywhere up on the vertical. It was literally the bare minimum without them having to move it down. So obviously it's better than if he got like 23 and a half, because then they would have had to move it down. That would have been embarrassing. But still, it's a pretty low number that you don't want to be in that, category. And honestly, Buggs is a guy who he's not going to have the highest draft stock anyways, but I think there's enough on film to use him for a later pick. So he's definitely going to be drafted somewhere, but it's going to be probably, late day 2, probably early day 3, unless he shows something at the pro day or he does something in an interview, or who knows, maybe the Redskins will just take him just to take him. Okay. Next up, we have Mack Wilson. And honestly, he's been nursing an injury, so we knew he wasn't going to do a whole lot. He's another one of those guys that's been injured. I mean, that's 4 players who are injured, and then plus you add Christian Miller, who's, still recovering from a late season injury. So that's 5 guys who were either held back or just not 100% in some way due to injury, which is, a really tough number to get through. But Mack Wilson, all he did was vertical and broad jump, so I'm not really going to talk too much about how his combine went, because I mean, he's a linebacker, vertical and broad jump. That's not enough to prove whether or not you're a good linebacker. The one thing that is going to hurt Mack Wilson are the fact that the 2 linebackers in front of him, Devin White and Devin Bush, the 2 Devins, they both had, excellent combines. So their stock is just rising as much as it humanly can. And at this point, there's a gap between tier 1 and tier 2. And people used to think that Mack Wilson was, at the bottom of tier 1, but now the other 2 are rising so much, he's hoping to lead the pack of tier 2. But there's definitely a gap between, those early round or early picks in general, and that's the 2 Devons. And Mack Wilson's probably going to find his way, late first round. Honestly, probably somewhere in the second or third round, unless he can do something to, change his stock within the coming weeks. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about Savion Smith because, we've talked about earlier, he's kind of running away from Alabama instead of running to the NFL draft. He knew he wasn't getting much play time. He didn't want to transfer. He knew this was his best shot to make the NFL, and it's still a slim shot. So, he didn't do the 40, and out of all the DBs that did the short shuttle and three cone, he was last in short shuttle and one of the last in three cone. So it just wasn't a good day because, for DBs, those are the big three things that matter. Obviously, you want to get, good vertical or broad jump and things of that nature. But the things that show your quickness and your reflexes and your ability to like change directions and your lateral speed, it's the short shuttle and the three cone. And then you're just, speed in general is obviously the 40. The fact that he didn't do the 40 probably means he wasn't expecting to have a good time. And the fact that he did battle in the short shuttle and three cone, he's going to have to improve on those. And that's probably going to be a point of emphasis in his pro day if I had to guess. With DBs, those aren't really the ones that you really care about, the bench press numbers or things like that. That's more of a, how quick can you move? How agile are you? How quick can you switch your direction? And does it look clean? And with his, it just didn't look that clean. So up next, Christian Miller. Like we said, he's still recovering from a late injury. And all he did was the vertical and broad jump. He had one of the best vertical jumps from an edge. So there's proof that when he's healthy, it's in the film too. When Christian Miller's healthy, he's one of the better edge prospects in this class. The question is, like the question has been with a lot of Alabama players in recent memory, is he going to be healthy enough to sustain that in the NFL? That's the same question that plagued, Sean Dion Hamilton. It's what hurt Reuben Foster and Jonathan Allen. Of course, multiple things hurt Reuben Foster, but there's just some, it hurt Eddie Jackson, obviously. So it's just one of those things where if he can stay healthy, he is going to have a really successful NFL career, and people are going to ask themselves, why did we not draft this guy sooner? How did he fall this far down the board? But if he stays injured, then it's going to be a wasted pick. I would take the risk on him just because, we've seen what he can do when he's healthy. He's also a great leader. He showed that in the senior day. Of course, he couldn't perform, but he still showed up to senior day to talk to people and, talk to the fans and get coached, even if he wasn't on the field, which really says something about his character. And, Christian Miller is a great guy. I really think that if he's closer to 100% for his pro day, in team workouts, then he's going to be able to move up his draft stock. But it's just hard at this time of year to be injured because this is where you prove your point and you really affect your draft stock. The season and your tape in general is going to put you about where, so like you're going to know, oh, based on film, this guy's, a day one prospect or a day two or a day three or an undrafted type of prospect. You can figure that out on film. But what really places you on in terms of, your ranking within your position. So are you the best edge in the group or are you more about the, 10th or 11th best edge in the group? Stuff like that. That's really where these workouts come into play for most positions, especially, things where it's more of a physical game like, linebacker, corner, edge, positions like that. That's where this really matters. And I think there's enough on film to like him, and I know he's going to make a team happy, but he might fall a little bit down the board if he can't get 100% to, fill out the rest of his profile. So, all right. Next, Damian Harris. We got just a couple left. Damian Harris is probably one of the biggest fan favorites in this class. He didn't do three cone or short shuttle, which, if he was going to have a bad time, it's good not to do it. But if I were him, I probably would have done it. Just, if you thought your time was going to be good at all, because that's something that can really separate you, especially for a guy like Damian Harris, because he's not I'm going to, just manhandle you and just, stiff arm you into the ground. He's not a Derrick Henry type. He's an elusive, I'm going to make you miss. I'm going to find find some free grass and take it. So things that really talk about agility, that's really where you make your mark. Of course, he had a 4.57 40, which I mean, it's nice. It's not, fantastic, but I think that's a good number for a player like Harris. That's definitely enough speed to, not get pulled down if you break out a run. It's obviously not, Holyfield type numbers, which is great for Damian Harris. And I mean, I really like Damian Harris. I think he also, we haven't heard anything about it, but I can't picture him giving a bad interview. So he's one of those guys where if you talk yourself into it and then you have a conversation with him, you want this guy on your team. There's just no other way to think about it because he's that good of a player, and he's that good of a person, and he's the type of leader that you want. He reminds me of Mark Ingram in that way. He just has that personality that once you have him on your team, you just want to keep him. But there's, of course, a little bit left to be desired in the physical aspect of his game. But, I mean, and also the fact that he had so many carries in college, there's going to be a question about wear and tear. But, I think he'll have a good career nonetheless. All right, Jonah Williams. So, a lot of what the talk with Jonah Williams isn't about is he good enough to play in the NFL. It is strictly, is he big enough to play tackle? He's a guy he's 302 pounds. That's what he weighed in at. But he's always talked about the fact that he has to fight so hard and eat so much to keep that weight. His metabolism is so high that he can just somehow just lose so much weight no matter what he does to keep it on. And also his arm length, because that's something that really matters for tackles. And he has 33 and 5/8 inch arms, which most people think that's below the threshold. I think that's a little bit dumb, honestly, because when you watch the film, he has, the perfect form to keep up with pretty much any edge he faced. He got beat very little in his, 3-year career, and he played all over the line. So I think he'd be a really good person to have, on any offensive line. And if anything, it just makes him versatile. So let's say you have a serviceable backup at left tackle and your center goes out, then he can go play center if you need him to. But they're going to get fixated on this whole arm length issue, and I really think it's dumb. And he actually addressed it in his interviews. So in his first interview question with the media, all of his questions were about, do you think you're big enough to play in tackle? Do you think you're going to have to move positions? All they were talking about is whether or not he's going to play tackle. And the first thing he did was he listed pretty much every successful tackle who had smaller arms than him off the top of his head. And he just listed off at least, 5 or 6 names just without even thinking and said, I have longer arms than all of them. And I think they're all really good players. And then he very respectfully explained the fact that, I'll play wherever a team wants me. If they want me to play center, I'll do it. If they want me to play guard, I'll do it. That being said, I was the best tackle in college football. And it's 100% right. He was the best offensive tackle in college football. There's no denying that. So, if it worked in college, why would it not work in the NFL at something like offensive line? Obviously, it's different for, quarterbacks or something else. But if you can block in the SEC at left tackle, then you can do it in the NFL in my eyes. And then one other one-liner, he was talking to one guy, he said, he was a reporter, and he said, if your arms were longer, you'd reach the keyboard easier, but that you can be a great rider either way. So he's saying, it doesn't matter, it might be a benefit to have it, but that doesn't mean you can't be good at something just because it's not as easy for you to do it. And he's proven that his entire life. So I don't have any issue with Jonah Williams saying all those things. I really think it just shows how important this is to him and how much it matters to him to play tackle. And then the fact that he also said, I'll play wherever you want me to play, I think that's good for him. Because, if someone drafts him and says, hey, you're our offensive guard, he's going to be one of the best offensive guards in the NFL. He would just rather play tackle, and he think he would be better at tackle, which I would honestly agree with him. But, obviously rooting for Jonah Williams. All right, last guy we're talking about with the draft is obviously going to be Irv Smith. He had the 4th best time for a 40 with tight ends. It was at 4.63. And then he had a pretty bad broad jump, and then everything else was somewhere between average and below average. And honestly, it wouldn't affect him that much because everyone knows what kind of player he is based off of film. The problem is that the 2 tight ends ahead of him on the rankings, Fant and Hawkinson, they were both, they had just stellar combine performances. They both held their stock more than pretty much almost any position. And the fact that he's going to have to, compete with two amazing tight ends in pretty much any other class, he'd be TE1 easy. But the fact that he's going up against two guys who are probably going to be, consistent Pro Bowl contenders, that's going to move him to tight end 3 without him, doing anything to hurt himself. He could have had a better pro day, or excuse me, a better combine. He might have a good pro day, but there's just two people that are, if you're going to compare him to what else is available, then it's going to hurt him. But that doesn't mean that he's not going to be successful when he goes and plays in the NFL. I think it just means that he might not be the most successful tight end from this class. And if you watch the film, it's pretty obvious that he can do some amazing things. Of course, he's flawed. He makes mistakes. But I would not be concerned with drafting him just because there are two better guys. So what? He'll be the third tight end drafted. Those other two are going to go within the first 20 picks in the draft, if I had to guess. So he's still going to go somewhere late first round, early second round. And that's pretty much where he would have been slotted anyways. So, I mean, nothing against him. I think he definitely could help himself with the pro day. But either way, I think he's still, firmly cemented as the third best tight end in this class. And I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to hurt him from, being ranked there. Okay, let's go ahead and bust out free agency real quick because there's been a lot of Alabama players who are moving teams, who are getting new contracts, and honestly, they're making money. I mean, we have the highest paid safety and the highest paid linebacker in the history of the NFL, both on the same day, both from the same school, and that's not even everyone that's moving. I mean, freaking Heisman winner from Alabama is moving, some movement on the O-line, and of course there's some bad news like, AJ McCarron, and we're going to get to him in a minute. But let's just start with CJ Mosley. I know this is going to be tough because I know a lot of Alabama fans are Ravens fans, and of course Ozzie Newsome has always wanted Alabama guys, and as soon as he's gone, they're not able to retain CJ Mosley. I think that they thought they were going to get him, but 5 years, $85 million, 51 guaranteed. Of course you're going, how can you turn that down? I really like the Jets doing this. I think the Jets have a cornerstone in their defense for the foreseeable future while they still have that rookie contract so they can afford to pay him. And also, I think that the Jets, if they don't trade their first round pick, they're in prime position to draft Quinnen Williams. And having two Alabama players, lead that defensive unit, I think it's pretty much the best case scenario for the Jets. Of course, they need help on offense as well, the O-line and maybe some receiver help. But either way, I really like the fact that they're saying this is a priority for us and we're going to go spend for it. And obviously, congratulations, CJ Mosley, he's a fan favorite. I don't think he's quite Mount Rushmore territory for Alabama, but he is 100% a fan favorite here in Tuscaloosa. So congratulations on, making $85 million potentially over 5 years. That's just insane. So his family's not going to have to worry for the rest of their lives about money. So congratulations, CJ Mosley. Really proud of him. All right. And then next one, Landon Collins. So this one is one that I think this is the best storyline for free agency from Alabama for a few reasons. So first off, obviously Landon Collins is, one of the best safeties in the NFL, and he's one of the best, Alabama players in the NFL in general. And he's always talked about wanting to play for the Redskins. And one of the reasons is because he says he mauled his game after Sean Taylor. And even when he was going drafted, most people will say, oh, I just want whoever will draft me. He said, I want to go play where Sean Taylor played. I want to go be a Redskin. And obviously the Giants took him instead. But the fact that he's going to be able to go to Washington, and I doubt he'll wear 21. I'm not sure if it's retired or not, but if it's available, I'm sure he'd take it. But he says he wears number 21 because of Sean Taylor. And he says he mauls his game after Sean Taylor. And that was like a role model for him growing up. So the fact that he's going to go play where Taylor played and make 6-year contract, $84 million, $15 million signing bonus, $44.5 million guaranteed, the most expensive safety contract. And obviously, all these contracts, you might not get all the money, you might get cut, you might, some of it's incentive money that you might not reach. But either way, he's going to be making a big chunk of that money. and I think that's great for Landon Collins. And obviously, being the most expensive safety contract. One thing that was really interesting is we thought that this wasn't going to happen. So when you think about the safeties in this class, there were just so many in the free agency market. And when there's that many, you think that they're either one of two things is going to happen. Either the stock for all of them and their price tag is going to go down just because there's so many of them. You don't have to pay for the one when there's 8 teams that need a safety and there's like 7 or 8 quality safeties. Then it kind of evens out. You don't have to overpay for a guy. But then also what could happen is when you're one of the first big name safeties off the board, then you kind of get shortchanged because anyone can say, okay, I want to make more than Landon Collins. So being one of the first names off the board could have hurt him because if, let's say, the other guys were signed before him, he could say, okay, I want to make more than these guys. And obviously that did not happen, which is great news for Landon Collins. And of course, Washington, they're pretty much the Alabama Crimson Tide now on defense. I'm not sure how many players away they are from having an entire, starting defense of Alabama players, but Jesus Christ, they are incredibly close. So obviously, congratulations to Landon Collins. Hopefully, I don't think the Redskins are going to be in a position to win this next year, but in the future, as soon as they get their quarterback, they are going to be off to the races. So, all right, the next big name, obviously, it has to be Mark Ingram. I know I haven't talked to Oakley about this yet, but I know Oakley is a huge Mark Ingram fan and a huge Saints fan. He has a Mark Ingram Saints jersey, which I guess he's going to have to hang on the wall now. But it's really tough because I know a lot of Alabama fans are Ravens fans, but a lot of Alabama fans are Saints fans as well. Because when you live in Alabama, the closest teams to you are like New Orleans. There are a couple of Florida teams, but you usually don't root for them. You have the Titans and you have the Falcons. Usually you're one of those three, unless you root for the Ravens because of that, or now you root for the Redskins because they take so many players. But usually you're in one of those small groups. And I know there are a lot of, diehard Saints fans and diehard Bama fans that overlap. So losing one of your favorite running backs from your NFL and college team at the same time, it's just rough to see. But at least he's going to a place that's going to value him. Obviously, he got 3 years, $15 million. It's not as much as people were expecting, or at least as I was expecting. But he's going to, do a lot. He's going to do big things in Baltimore, if we're being perfectly honest. The one big thing is, he's going to be a fan favorite wherever he goes. And I think the fan base there is really going to like his personality and the fact that he's going to be not only doing things in the community, but he's going to be doing things on the field with the fans. He's a guy that you just like the fact that he's on your team. And so I think Baltimore is going to be really happy with this, especially, at pretty much a cheaper price than obviously some of the bigger names were going. The Ravens, some people thought they were going to get Le'Veon Bell. And I'm not saying Mark Ingram's as good as Le'Veon Bell, but he's definitely a lot cheaper. One interesting thing that happens here is the fact that the Ravens were considered to be one of the landing spots for Josh Jacobs in this draft. And now you don't have to draft him because you're taking a different Alabama guy. So Alabama guys are pretty much stealing each other's jobs at this point. But either way, it's going to be weird seeing him in a Ravens jersey. But I can't help but think he's going to do big things with Lamar Jackson in that offense, especially since they're already run first in the first place. And, if the Saints didn't want to pay him, there's not much he could have done. All right, just a couple names we can go through. James Carpenter, offensive lineman, went from the Jets to the Falcons. 4 years, $21 million, 7 guaranteed at signing, 9.25 in total guarantees. So 9.25 in total guarantees, $7 million of it at signing. So big contract for James Carpenter. Now he's going to be a Falcon. Of course, moving away from the Jets as soon as they get another Jets. There are a lot of teams that are, losing one player, gaining one player. Kareem Jackson going the Broncos, 3 years, $33 million, $23 million guaranteed. Huge, it's been a while since he's played Alabama. He's one of the older vets in the NFL, but he's still getting his money. So a lot of people thought that he might bust in the NFL, and then they also thought he might wash out over time, but he definitely has not yet. So, and the only other, huge name in terms of good news is HaHa Clinton Dix. he's going to Chicago to go play with Eddie Jackson. So 2 Alabama players in the Bears secondary, but 1 year, $3.5 million. I mean, it's not a whole lot, but it's also just for 1 year. So I think it's going to be a chance for him to prove himself for a great team, and then either be a 1 year, almost a rental, and then move on, or just to prove yourself within that team, and then they're going to pay you the real money. But I don't think it's the end of HaHa's career after this 1 year in the NFL by any stretch. All right, let's go ahead and go through some of the bad news. So a lot of people got cut, and we're not really sure, or their contracts just expired, and we're not sure if they're going to get re-signed. So the ones that we are most certain about, for me at least, is TJ Yeldon. I don't know where TJ Yeldon's going to go, but he's, obviously he'll last play with the Jaguars. I'm sure he's going to get a contract somewhere. It's really odd to see how this running back market's playing out. But now that, the bigger names are gone, if people just need, a guy to put in the rotation, Yeldon would do a great job there. So we're just going to have to see what happens with him. Obviously, Andre Smith is up for a renewal contract. I don't know if he's going to get it. Carson Tinker, he's not going to get it. He was with the Jaguars, but they have taken another player. So the Jaguars, obviously, Tinker's a long snapper. You don't need more than one. That's just going to be a supply and demand issue. I'm not really sure what teams need a long snapper, because usually you need at most two. Most teams, only really need one. Maybe they'll put one on the practice squad just in case, but that's not really one that you build depth at. So if there are teams available, obviously Carson Tinker would love to go there. It's just going to be interesting, see what's out there for him. And if not, maybe he can make something happen in the AAF, because he's obviously got the talent. He's also been injured recently. So having, injury concerns at something as, trivial as a long snapper is pretty tough. And a few other players that we're just not sure what's going on. Andre Smith, Eric Kwanjo, he might see his time in the NFL kind of run out. He's, doesn't have a contract. He's currently just, hoping to make a team. I think he's a guy who, if he doesn't make it, he could definitely make it in the AAF somewhere. I'm not really sure which team would have the rights, if it would be Birmingham or if it would be whichever NFL team or whichever AAF team's closest to his last NFL team. We're just going to have to wait and see there. Justin Fowler, fullback, he's just an odd player because, the NFL doesn't really employ fullbacks that much anymore. So, Fowler's a great guy, and, he was, really loved and respected at Alabama. But, when you're a fullback, there's not much you can do. It's another supply and demand issue. Like, how many teams need a fullback right now? Most teams don't even carry one anymore. So, the last big name, and then we're probably going to close out the podcast, is A.J. McCarron. A.J. McCarron was released by the Raiders. Of course, this wasn't a huge surprise because it saves them. They weren't really in a space to worry about saving money on their cap. They're more about trying to save like actual dollars because they don't have enough to spend their entire cap even if they wanted to. So, for example, I believe it saved them $5 million of actual like money, not cap money, which means that they're just hoping not to have to pay that much money. And if you're looking at a backup quarterback, paying him $5 million would that be tough for anybody. So I'm obviously rooting for AJ McCarron. I think he is a serviceable backup somewhere. Maybe Miami. I know they're going to have some issues at quarterback. Maybe if he wants to go back up Nick Foles with the Jaguars. There are a few scenarios that I could see him going. Honestly, at this point, it might be more likely for him to either, call it quits. I think he has enough money to retire easily, especially with his wife being a model. And obviously, he's going to make money just being a former Alabama legend. Anytime he goes to Alabama, he's probably going to pull in thousands of dollars doing signings and interviews. He's going to have plenty of books written about him and about his time in the NFL. And he has a great story, so at some point he's going to get paid to tell it. But another likely scenario is that he goes and plays for the AAF because, of course, he last played in Oakland. I'm not really sure how the AAF works in terms of, choosing like a team. Of course, quarterbacks are different. He'll probably get drafted in the next draft anyways. But if he just goes and signs with the team, it'd either be the Birmingham Iron, which they might lose a quarterback or two to, NFL contracts, or it might be the San Diego Fleet, and I'm sure they would take him if they could. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens with AJ McCarron. Obviously, we're rooting for him, but uh, I think he'll find at least one more contract. It won't be as big as his last one, and it won't be to compete for a starting position. But if you have a young guy and you need someone to back him up that you know is capable of doing that, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't go for AJ McCarron. He's a great character. He's a good leader. He's a good locker room guy. So hopefully someone goes and takes him, even if you don't really. I mean, I'm not to insult AJ McCarron, but at this point, if he was good enough to play as a starter, he would have done it already. He played for the Raiders, which was one of the worst teams in the NFL last year. Backed up Andy Dalton forever, and they had some really tough times. He only started a couple of games, so he has plenty of options. It's just I don't know how many of them are completely viable. For example, I don't know what NFL teams are going to want to take AJ McCarron. Worst case scenario, he goes and he works for the SEC network, kind of like Greg McElroy did, and I think he would have a good career in broadcasting because he has the personality to do it, and he has the voice and the ability to like compose himself well enough on camera to I'm sure Alabama fans would tune in to what he has to say. And I mean, no offense to Greg McElroy, but he's proven that you can take some bad takes sometimes and still make it on camera. So I mean, I don't know if that's really something AJ would consider, but obviously he has a son that he loves to spend time with if he does decide to retire. But there are plenty of options. It's just whatever's the best option for him that's really conceivable, because we're gonna have to wait and see how the quarterback market pans out. It might be after this NFL draft class comes through to figure out who still needs a quarterback or who needs a backup or who needs a mentor for their young guy, because not all teams that need quarterbacks are going to draft one. Some will, but obviously there's just too many teams that need one. So maybe the Redskins pick him up because the Redskins are going to need help at quarterback. They're already paying Case Keenum, but I mean, if they don't take a quarterback this year, I think that it would make sense for them to sign AJ McCarron because Case Keenum's he doesn't play 100% of minutes. So I don't know. That's just a tough one. And, not every career ends gracefully. Sometimes you get cut and then you don't get re-signed. It happens to, unfortunately, the majority of players. You don't really get to ride it out in the sunset like you wish you would. But I'm hoping that AJ McCarron gets at least one more contract to prove himself as a serviceable backup. And if not, I hope I get to watch him play football in the AAF or get to see him on TV talking about, football in SEC Nation. Whatever he does, I'm sure Alabama fans are going to support it. And whenever his books come out, I'm sure they're going to read it because, like I said, he is an Alabama legend at quarterback. So I think that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Went a little longer than I was expecting, especially with it just being me, without a couple of hosts, bounce things off of. But if you're still listening, please give us a rating on iTunes. Those are really appreciated. Subscribe on iTunes. I don't know if it's follow or subscribe on Spotify. We're kind of new to it, honestly, but whatever it is, make sure you do that. Follow us on Twitter. Get involved. Leave comments. Do whatever you want to do to stay in contact with Dorm Squad Sports. It means the world to us. We greatly appreciate it. And, we'll take whatever we can get. So thank you all so much for listening. We're going to be putting out stuff about Alabama's Pro Day in the future, in the recent future, in the near future. And with that being said, I hope you all have a great day. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your spring break if you're on it. And if your spring break is about to happen, hope you enjoy that as well. Have a good day, a happy week, and roll tide.